Welcome to the Mindful Table with Health Empowerment Coach Joanna Mickel and myself, Maame-Mensima Horne, Naturopathic Doctor and Clinical Hypnotherapist, where we discuss natural approaches to health and wellness with an emphasis on being mindful. Today's episode, we will discuss goal setting, lifestyle changes, and New Year's resolutions. The holidays are nearing, and as the new year is coming, the pressure is on. So we'll discuss a little bit about how we maintain our healthy lifestyles during the holidays, and then also how do we set goals, how to set goals, and how to stay on track when you're making lifestyle and health related changes. So, Joanna, I wanted to start by asking you, do you make New Year's resolutions?
Well, I used to. I mean, it's kind of like a restart. We think about the new year as, oh, it's a new year, it's a new me, it's a new this, and it's kind of like every week you want to start a diet. We can't start a diet any day other than Monday. We can't start a new lifestyle until the new year starts. We can't do something major in our life till that time. It's like we have to have this like timeline or this cutoff point. That's the end of last year. I'm no longer the last year's person. I'm a new year, which is true because all the experiences you had along the year. Sometimes I don't necessarily do a New Year's resolution, but I do kind of set me a goal, something I'd like to obtain within the year. Things like that. But I like to be aware that any time of the year I can make a change. Any time of the year is a good time to start. And really, any time of the week is a good time to start a diet. But I don't like diets anyway, so I don't really want to say that either. Because diets are temporary, And, when we make a change, or at least when I see a change, it's something that I want to be able to continue for the rest of my life. It's really about something that is going to make me a better person, something that's going to cultivate in me what I would love to be, whether it be health related, career related, character related. And, anything that requires character is going to be a little bit rough and tough to do. Because I was looking on Facebook one day and this reel popped up of a gentleman. He likes to share a lot of wise sayings and stuff. He said, many people want to have character and the easy life. He says you can't have both. They are inverse of one another. The easier your life, the less character you have. The more character you have, the less easy your life is. And I was like, wow, that's pretty profound, but very true. We don't get stronger with easy, right? So when we're making these changes, when we're making lifestyle changes, we're going to make a New Year's resolution. These usually aren't easy things, and a lot of times we're not ready for them yet. We haven't quite grasped what that's going to be, and so sometimes we set ourselves up for failure, and that's why a lot of times we look at New Year's resolution like, why do I bother? It's going to be bad in 2 weeks, right? So that's kind of what led us to this topic this evening. So how about you? What do you do? Do you do New Year's resolutions?
So for the New Year's, I don't quite make resolutions, but I do essentially like a reflection of the
Mm,
year, what
nice.
has gone well, what has not gone well, and then I decide what changes I should be focusing on. Sometimes I set 5-year plans. That
Mm-hmm.
was what I actually did before I got into medical school. I sat down and I started it actually like during pre-med. I sat down and I said, what do I want the next 5 years to be like? What are my wildest dreams? What are like the things that are like must do's and things like that? And so for me, choosing naturopathic school and knowing that I was going to dedicate myself to that work, of
Mm-hmm.
course, I was like, oh, I'm going to meet somebody and all these other things. I met great friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there are the things that I can control and then the things that I can't control. But I used the New Year's to actually reflect on what am I doing right and what am I
Mm-hmm.
not doing as well, or what are areas that I want to improve upon, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then for me, I actually use the lunar calendar. So with the new moon, I'm looking at what are the things I want to work on for the month. And then at the full moon, which is about 2 weeks in, I'm like, okay, what is not working? What do I want to release? What do I want to change? And I found that that has worked well for me. I started doing
Mm.
that when we were at SCNM in
Mhm.
Arizona. And there are months where it's just like, okay, like I'm just coasting. I am not going to be doing anything drastic. There's no major changes. Sometimes it's like, I just need to rest. And
Mhm.
so those months, I just allow myself to just rest. And then when I think about the things that I need to, that I want to release or not hold on to, those are like every two, it's almost every month that I'm just like, okay, maybe this isn't working. Maybe it's
Mhm.
time to go with this plan, or maybe I need to recommit, right? Because
Mhm.
I find that a lot of times it does every, you like you said, in about 2 weeks, the New Year's resolution kind of falls apart.
Mhm.
And so, what about having a check in? Like, we check our gas, we check our engine, we go to a mechanic, and we have everything checked to make sure that things are going on right. So, I do a
Mhm.
check in with myself to see if I'm on the right track. Have I fallen away from my goals? Do I need to rededicate myself? And if I need to rededicate, what does that look like?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's really like the way that I work with it. And there's something that you said that I really appreciated, the facing adversity, or having the easy life and then having character. And
Mhm.
well, during my naturopathic training, one of my teachers, he would say that humans want to reduce the level of adversity that they're experiencing. So we want to minimize the suffering, but having the like a balance between adversity and not suffering, ease, as we call it, the softness, is really what we should be working at. So, for example, if you want to go to medical school, right? There's a period of getting in that sucks. It does. You have to make sure that you take the prerequisites. You have to make sure that you pass your exams. You have to make sure that to meet the requirements for admission. So during that period, maybe you are working extra hard. Maybe you are doing these things that you would not normally do in order to achieve that goal. And then afterwards, then you can relax a little bit. Of course, like we stay studying all the time, but you can study and find a new balance, which allows you to incorporate a little bit more of the ease of life, right? So that's something that I found being ambitious and having high achieving goals, that there is a balance between the adversity, which helps us to actually create the character that we need in order to be maybe present or be better people, but also having ease and enjoyment as a part of life, because we are not just machines who are meant to just keep going and going. We have to balance that ambition with ease. So, like, I know we talked a little bit about what we are doing, how we kind of make changes, how we look at our goals and what we are doing with, especially with the New Year's coming. But when you're working with your clients, how do you support them as they're making their lifestyle changes?
Well, the one thing is the first thing I tell them is, I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you. I'm here to guide you, because a lot of times this is an issue that I tend to have with some clients, is they don't want to show up when they fell, when they've made a misstep, or they're not following the program as they should, and they're like, well, I don't want to come because I didn't do X, Y, and Z. I'm like, no, that's when you come. you know when you're trying to make changes, this is hard for you to do, because you're going to fall into the subconscious, right? And that's why it's so good to have a coach, or to have someone working with you to help you to make those changes, because it helps to keep it in the forefront of the mind, right? We are creatures of habit and we're changing it. That's what a lifestyle change is. It's changing a habit that hasn't served you for your goals. So we have to be cognizant of the things that we're doing and falling back in those habits. So when you go and you're having these regular check-ins with either a health coach or your naturopathic doctor, or whoever is helping you on your goals in life, or your lifestyle changes is to go when you make those slip ups. And so we can say, okay, what was the trigger that set you in that pattern? Right? What is the pattern that's this habit continues forward? So we can say, okay, what can we do to break that pattern that doesn't keep you in that lifestyle? What's some things that we can make that can trigger you to say, oh, I don't want to go that way. That's not the choice I want to continue. This is my new choice. And every time you come in and if you continue the same, trip up every week, that's okay, as long as you're coming in and we can rematch it, because the next week it's eventually going to catch on, because that's going to be in your brain. We keep saying, this is the way we're doing, this is the way we're doing it. And you'll eventually, and it takes, research says it takes about 14 weeks to change a habit. So you're not going to get it overnight. It's not going to be something that's going to happen. So a lot of times when I'm working with clients, I want to state this to them. When you're trying to change a habit that you've had for life, it's not an overnight thing. It's going to at least take 14 weeks of every week being very cognizant of this change that you're trying to make. And if you make a mistake or you have a hiccup or something doesn't quite fall in line and you're not perfect, and it's hard to get it perfect the first time. And with kids, that's their way. They get, oh, I didn't do it. Well, you've never done it. So no, you're not going to get it the first try. And that's the same with any of us. We're not going to get the first try. So making sure that you don't, put the negative tops or keep yourself from going to those that are helping you make those changes is going to be the most beneficial to you. Again, if you're, there's no life, you're not going to have character with an easy life. You're not going to have that result from an easy fix. The easy fix is really just going back into the subconscious of what you did begin with. That's only what's easy. So it eventually becomes easy. The life becomes easy the more you do it, right? Like you can't even remember, how hard it was to start driving if you've been driving for years. We tend to go into autopilot now because we've done it so much, and we forget when we're sitting behind the wheel like this and you're going, I can't keep it in the lane very well. I'm going over here. Oh, I'm going, and that's the same. So when we're switching into a new lifestyle habit or something that's taking us away from maybe going towards, say, we want to eat more vegetables, and trying to make sure that you have the vegetables and you know how to cook them. It's not easy to, I'm going to tell you, even from my own self and my life journeys, it's hard sometimes to get those vegetables in because you have to prep them, you have to have them on, and they can go bad really quick if you don't use them. So it's making sure that you plan. Eating vegetables takes a lot of planning, I'm going to just tell you. And I'm a nutritionist and a health coach. It takes time. But once you start saying, oh, this is how I like to cook them, and this is the ones I like to have on hand all the time, maybe I can have, you start learning the tricks, but it takes time. You're like, oh, I get a lot of people, I didn't quite make my vegetables this week. I forgot to plan for them, and I've been there too, and I'm like, I understand it is tricky sometimes, but we want to get in there and we feel good once we start getting them in, because it's like, oh yeah. And there's times if I haven't had meat, my vegetables in a few days, I'm like, where's my vegetables? I need my vegetables. you know so you build that habit, but it's not easy when we start. And that character that we get with it, because it teaches us discipline, it teaches us, I think you were mentioning it, the ability to have, well, one of the things I'd like to say is resilience, right? These types of things gives us resilience, the ability to be able to, in other situations, to be able to respond to it, to have the thinking and say, oh, I can do this because I did that. The more that you make these changes, and they don't have to be big changes, just small changes, every success, and you always, you have more success when you work with somebody, but the more successes that you make, that character of knowing I can do it becomes a reality to you. So you don't have that, which is one of the things a lot of people have with the whole idea, and this is why I'm not a big proponent of New Year's resolutions, is it creates a mentality of failure, because we're not giving ourselves realistic goals. We're not giving us the support we need for these goals. And we tend to fail within the first 2 weeks because we're set up for failure. And so that's what creates in us that mentality that I'm just not going to do well with it. And then we just throw up our hands to any lifestyle change. Whereas when we create us an environment to succeed, and understanding that we need support, we don't have to do it alone, and that we give ourselves a real goal that we're actually ready for, a change we're ready for, then we're going to be more apt to be successful in it. And knowing it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
No change is easy. There used to be these signs for the election. I don't know what it was all about because I don't really get too much into politics, but it was saying change isn't nice. I think is what it said was the whatever that was. And I was thinking about change isn't nice. Well, if you think about it in easy, it's not really nice because, if you like eating, your little Debbie snacks and you can't really have those anymore because they're GMOs, there are lots of sugar and who knows what other stuff is in those little Debbies. We used to eat those a lot when I was a kid. Um, but they ain't healthy. It's not nice to take away your little Debbies, but I'm not going to take them out 100%, but we got to know how to use them and when to use them, or get a substitute that's really healthy. So
Yeah.
those are things that we have to think about, that's going to give us the most success in our lifestyle changes. So that's kind of what I talk about with my clients, to give them a realistic picture of what a change is going to take, what a lifestyle habit, what kind of commitment you have to take, and how much are you willing to do.
No, thank you for sharing that. For me, I like what you were talking about when people fall off of track,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the work that takes the most vulnerability. And
Mm-hmm.
working this week, I talked to two of my patients. One of them was essentially saying that they didn't reach out because they were going through a rough time. And
Mm-hmm.
then I encouraged them that they should reach out, and it's okay to be vulnerable. That is the work that I do, and that is
Mm-hmm.
the support that I offer, is helping people by providing a space where they can explore what is going on so that they can be more resilient out
Mm-hmm.
in the world. One of the things that I took from yoga is what we do on the mat helps us for when we're off the mat. For example, if your transitions, like when you're doing a yoga pose, if you're going between poses, if you're really hard on yourself and pushing yourself a little aggressively, or maybe your transitions are pretty smooth, like you're able to hold that position and then gracefully move through the movement to the next one. How we move on the mat really does reflect what we do in our life. And so those reminders that, hey, we don't have to be perfect. We just should practice some level of awareness so that we know what's going on and how we can make those changes. So that's actually really great, because one of the things that I wanted to talk about is exactly that. What happens when people relapse or backslide?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times shame is what comes up, right? And that shame essentially perpetuates the negative thinking, and I'm not good enough, oh, I'm a failure, and the
Mm-hmm.
negative talk that we usually find, that I find in practice, that helping patients to work through. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that is one of my commitments is helping them to release the shame, helping
Mm-hmm.
them to recognize that that shame is coming from somewhere. And as you said, going and utilizing the subconscious to find the connection as to where shame was introduced into their life. And when they can clear the shame and release that shame, usually it's giving it back to whoever started it, whoever gave it to you. So we're giving it back. And I guide them through a process. I individualize it to the person and what comes up intuitively, but helping them to release that shame and give it back in a way that allows them to be free. And so then when it comes to their goals, they're actually able to have more ease, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like I know that I am not perfect, but I deserve this, or I forgive myself. And you know what? Now I'm going to go forward. So being able to release the shame and then be vulnerable, right? Being vulnerable and asking for help. A lot of, a lot of the things that we do that I find as a human being, I remember in my 20s, I was very much like, I don't need anyone to help me. I can do it myself. So I studied and read all the books and did all the trainings. But in reality, what I found is like, it wasn't until I got my first naturopathic doctor, or I started working, like when I did my yoga teacher training and I had my mentor and they were guiding me, that I was able to say, okay, like literally through my mentoring, that's where I
Mhm.
realized, oh snap, I like diagnosing. Maybe I should consider advancing my education. And
Mhm.
through that, that is where the seed was planted that maybe I should consider medicine, right? But
Mhm.
it wasn't until I committed and was vulnerable one on one with my mentor that I was able to identify that, hey, maybe there's a possibility for me to grow beyond where I am. Maybe my resistance to the system is limiting me and stopping
Mhm.
me, because my mentor was a lawyer. And she's like, I love being a yoga teacher, but I would never leave law. I want
Mhm.
to be a lawyer by day, yoga teacher in the evening and on the weekends. And I was
Mhm.
just like, wow, okay, I see that. I understand that. And
Mhm.
I need to like really think about my what is important to me, right?
Mhm.
So those experiences working one on one helps, number one, us to be vulnerable and to ask for the support and get the guidance that we may not even know that we need. And these are the things that I find and I utilize in programs. So instead of weight loss, I do a weight management program, and we're
Mhm.
managing the stress. We're
Mhm.
talking about lifestyle changes. So instead of talking about dieting, we're making nutritional changes and
Mhm.
lifestyle. Instead of exercising, how do we move our bodies, right?
Mhm.
So the language that we use is different,
Mhm.
because we're not just like, I hate exercise, I like hate going to the gym, but how do I actually get a lot of my movement in the mornings? I have a 50 or 40 or something, that I don't know, a 45-minute commute. Part of the commute is a long walk, and because I am not a type A personality who is really good at time management, I try my best. I will get there on time, but I'm usually running, literally running up the stairs, running down the stairs, running to catch that train. And that is how I exercise. And it's so wild because for whatever reason it works. It keeps me every day, 5 days a week. That is how I get my movement in. And then
Mhm.
I supplement that with other movement. Maybe I'll do body weight or yoga, but I'm not going to the gym. And it's funny because um I'm learning Korean, and in class, things like, oh, do you exercise every day? It's like, oh, I only exercise on the weekends, or I go to the gym and I do this. And I'm like, how do I even explain that my exercise is my lifestyle and trying to get where I need to go? Of course, if it's not important, like I do try my hardest to get places early, but with my current schedule, sometimes I have class and that class overlaps with another class. So I literally am waking up so early that I have to fit everything in. And then I'm just like, oh, I got to get where I need to go. So it's like jam packed. So, like, using that as an example for how, my lifestyle may be a little bit more movement oriented. um, I created it. Maybe my lifestyle is created to match my needs, but I'm very specific on what I need to achieve every single day in order to maintain my balance. And I find creative ways to incorporate movement into my day so that I'm not stuck in the, did I go to the gym? Do I even like the gym? That kind of mentality that gets us stuck in that, well, I don't like going to the gym, so I'm not going to exercise today. Or there's no dance class that I want to go to today, so I'm not going to exercise today. For me, there is no choice. I don't have a car. I'm not going to get a motor scooter here. I'm going to walk. I'm not going to pay money for Uber or a taxi or Kakao taxi. Those are my commitments. And that's part of the reason why, for me, my movement is just a part of my daily activity. So when we're looking at weight management, those are the kind of ways that we're having these conversations so that it's not about, you know, the mundane activity, and it allows for people to be a little bit more open in their change and their and what works for them.
I really have to
I know.
say, I mean, I really like what you just said there, about, incorporating it and then the verbiage. I think verbiage is very important because it really sets up the mind, right, for success. Um, and it really, to me, is something I'm like, that's something I might need to incorporate a little bit better in my practice as a health coach. Is, I liked that thought process. I think that's very important for individuals when they're going to start the new year or going to start a new lifestyle. Is, instead of saying weight loss, or like I said, I don't like when people say they're on a diet because it's temporary. And the one thing I tell my clients is whatever you did to lose weight is what you have to continue to do to maintain it. So, what we want to do here is to learn how to eat healthy, how to choose healthy, so that we can lose weight and maintain it for life. We got these crazy diets. This week, we were in food therapy class, and we were just discussing the different types of diets people come into the clinic with, or that they may deal with in their future practices, like ketogenic diets, vegan diets, the Mind diet, which is the new DASH diet. I hadn't heard it called Mind. I was taught DASH about when I was in undergrad about 6 years ago, but they've updated it. And then the intermittent fasting. These are diets people come in with, and how are you going to deal with these people and or these diets? Not these people. That's not the right way to say it, but you know what I mean. Is that these are the things that they're doing. How do you work with them, making sure they're getting the nutrients they need based upon their diagnoses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, for me, currently working as a health coach, and somebody comes in speaking that they've done these diets, I usually get into, again, the same question: is this something that's sustainable for life? And what is your goals? Because really, that's what we want to look at. We want to look at what is it that's your long term vision. And really, when I'm working with individuals on nutrition, it's really about saying, okay, what is it that we need to do long term for you? Ketogenic diets, these diets are all lovely and hunky dory. And yes, if you want to lose weight, but really what it comes down to is, how do we maintain long term? What is it that we're looking for? Again, instead of saying weight loss, I love that you said weight management, because this is what you're going to be doing for life. Sorry, our weight fluctuates up and down. I get on the scale, several times a week because I look at it for body composition, because that tells me what's going on in my body and how I can tweak things. But you're going to be managing your weight. Your weight is never going to stay one thing. Sometimes you're going to jump 5, especially in the wintertime. You're going to have a fluctuation up. This time of year, we're going to talk a little bit about how do we manage this time of year. We're going into the holiday season, parties, big Thanksgiving dinners, Christmas dinners, New Year's Eve. We're eating all the time. Always something yummy, yummy, yummy. And then of course the day has gotten shorter. It gets colder. We tend to not want to go and do our runs, like myself, because cold doesn't want to motivate me outside. So, we think about this, is these are things that we have to recognize, for us to recognize we're probably going to gain 5 pounds in the wintertime because we're moving less and we're eating more. Or we're going to have to do something about it. So we're going to be managing our weight, right? So it doesn't matter. You're never going to be outside of managing your weight. And a diet is a short term thing. And I always hear this: when I get done with my diet, I'm going to go back to eating normal. And what does that usually mean? Well, if whatever you were doing, you're eating normal, put you in an overweight position or in place you don't want to be and didn't feel good, you don't want to go back to that normal. We need a new normal, and that's why we're talking about lifestyle changes. This evening. So, question for you, Dr. Mama, is when we're making these changes and we're moving forward, what are some things that you do at this time of year when we're thinking about managing our weight, or you're managing your weight, that really resonates with you at this time of year?
So when it's holiday season, and I actually thought about this quite a bit because during my clinical internship, it was the first time that I was talking with patients and they wanted to make lifestyle changes, but they were like, oh, but the holidays are coming. I'll do it after the holidays. And then it becomes 2 months later, the holidays have passed, and then it's like, oh, well, it's birthday season. And so since it's birthday season, I'll do it after the birthdays. So what I've noticed is that if you don't have a plan and you're not really ready to make those changes, there's always going to be something that will stop you from doing what you say you want to do. So I go into it with a plan, right? So when I'm dealing with, I would say the normal world is like my everyday people, my community who is not on a special lifestyle and knows their food sensitivities and maybe prepares food with food sensitivities in mind, like for example, being in naturopathic school, so many people follow similar lifestyles. So there may not be some of the inflammatory foods because we know the effects that they have on our bodies. So what I do when I'm with like my family or family friends or just people who are like, hey, would you like to join us for said event? I usually bring something, right? I bring what will help me make it through. So some people love sweets. I appreciate sweets, but I never grew up eating pies and cakes. I was the kid who hated ice cream. I still don't eat ice cream. And so I came into this world with a very unique perspective, I guess, already. And as I got older, sweets got introduced into my life. And I realized that, specifically wheat, being in Korea, I realized I can tolerate barley. So it's not necessarily gluten in all forms. It's specific, um, grains that cause me to have reactions. So when it comes to like baked goods, I may go with the rice, like traditional pastries here, right? Things that are like traditionally made, they're less sweet. They use usually honey or a natural sweetener. They're not added sugar. They're usually made from rice flour. They're not made from wheat, right? So that's something that I found being here in Korea. And when I'm in the States, essentially I would do the same thing. If somebody's like, oh, I'm having dinner, would you like to come? Number one, I let them know, hey, these are my food sensitivities. If you can accommodate, please let me know and I will bring food as well. Is that okay? And so I usually come with what I like. So for dessert, sometimes I want fruit. And I will be the person that I would go and get watermelon, I'll get pineapples, I'll get things that I really enjoy that I know other people enjoy, berries, and then make a fruit salad. If I want dessert, when I like a sweet dessert, sweets, there were some gluten-free brands that I really like, but I also found that I like to bake sometimes. And so if I'm in the mood to actually prepare something that can be enjoyed by others, is usually healthier. I manage how much sweetener. So I'm either using maple syrup. I'm usually, if I'm making baked goods, I'm using maple syrup. So if I'm adding maple syrup to what I'm making, I'm not putting in like a whole half a cup or a cup. I usually use like in the tablespoons. So it's like it has a hint of sweetness, not too much sweetness. And then also, I love vegetables. So when people would have dinners, I would be the one to bring collard greens. But I would make my collard greens. I would use spices. It wasn't really like meat forward, like putting ham hocks or turkey in the greens. I do try, well, mainly because I like them separate, to be quite honest. And you never know who's going to be eating as well. So I make my greens, they're always a bit spicy, but I separated, I made it a healthy version. And healthy is relative, right? When I'm making my healthy versions of my favorite foods, I haven't got to mac and cheese just because I don't know. It's not, to me, it's not a food that I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm going to make mac and cheese. But if I'm making a healthy version, I find the things that I like, and then the things that I know that may cause unnecessary inflammation, I minimize them. There was a period when I was using flax seeds instead of eggs. I use eggs. I get the pasture raised because they actually, my, like, I know there's a difference. My patients notice a difference. If it's not pasture raised, it tends not to be like tolerated for most people. So even with the I do use therapeutic diets. So I will say that I do use a therapeutic diet, usually a short term and elimination style. Because when we do the reintroduction, I want to know what is actually causing you to have a reaction. So going down to therapeutic diets, it's hard during the holidays, especially if you're on a therapeutic diet at this time. So during this time, that's where I bring things that I know will work. This is where I really lean on my favorite fruits. This is where I'm creative with my vegetables. And sometimes I'll take something that's supposed to be sweet, I'll make it savory, and then, hey, why don't we try this? And I'm content versus being like, oh, I can't have this chocolate cake. Well, I can't have the chocolate cake because I have this food sensitivity. And so recently I did eat something that was not in alignment with my eating habits. And I was sick, like literally missed a whole day because I was out of commission. So if I'm going to be sick, to me, that actually is one of the things that is my biggest motivator, because if I'm sick, I can't show up. If I'm sick, I cannot work. If I'm sick, I'm the person that stays home. I'm not going to see people because my work is based off of sharing energy, my energy with others, right? Sharing and developing my capacity to be a source of light and compassion to others, and also help guide them medically. So if I'm sick, then that means that I'm not doing my job. And so if something's going to make me unwell, that is my motivation to refrain from it. And so during the holidays, literally, this is what I do. I mean, it's not a perfect way. It's something that I've come up with over time, but I know that when it comes to enjoying other people's company, because even with that, I don't drink alcohol, and people associate even the holidays with drinking. Some people do, and being having a merry time. And I'm like, you know what brings me the most joy is being around people who I enjoy. And so for me, I don't need to drink, because the joy that I feel and that relaxation comes from the company. So that's really what I do. And I encourage others to find that for themselves in a way that works for them through trial and error. Joanna, what about you? Like for you, how do you go into, like specifically, how do you help people to go into the holidays, and what are things that you do? I know personally that you are an amazing cook, and that you're somebody who does bake and do all these amazing things. I don't know how you have the time for it, but you do all these amazing things. And for me, you've actually been an inspiration, because like I remember the holidays in Arizona, like we spent them together, and there wasn't I'm not enjoying the holidays because you're so creative, and you create health options for us all to enjoy.
So for me, in the holiday season, you were talking about loving to cook. I do love to cook, and I love to find ways to make things a little bit healthier. And so for me, it's really saying, okay, what do I want to have for this holiday? Because holiday is all about foods and having fun, and so I make things a little bit, again, a healthier option. And sometimes I eat some of the things that I don't normally eat because this is the time of year for it. But I try to get smaller portions and recognize that I only want the things that really I would really, really like to eat. Like sometimes I've kind of gotten away from, I used to go for the mac and cheese, like you were talking about making mac and cheese a little bit healthier. Um, but just like you, I'm out of commission with mac and cheese. It can tear me up. So I have actually moved away from the mac and cheese. And the same with mashed potatoes. I used to love them, and I would eat them at the holidays. I would keep those for my holiday fun. And now it's just like, no. And so that is a big key a lot of times when we realize, I call it our informed consent on choosing food. And just like you, I do use a elimination diet in the start of my program so that people can get rid of the inflammation from their food and then do the reintroduction phase so they can learn, I call it their informed consent, because everybody's different. We can use IgG food sensitivity panels and different things like that, but sometimes it's a different form because there's different ways that our body reacts and responds to food and give us signs that it doesn't do well. And when you start recognizing the food and the side effect, that is just like your informed consent. If you choose to do this treatment, you can have a possibility of blah 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 as the side effects. If you've ever listened to a commercial on medicine, they give you all the side effects. Well, that's part of informed consent, because then you're going to say, well, this is my disease or this is my symptom, and you're going to give me this medication, which can give me these symptoms. Which symptom is worse? And then you say, what is the pros and cons? Maybe I shouldn't try that option. Maybe you need to give me another option, sir or ma'am. And it's the same with your food. You go, okay, this is my smorgasbord in front of me that I'm going to choose from for my meals to sustain me over this holiday. And you go down the list of all the foods. You got ham, you got turkey, you got roast, you got mashed potatoes, green beans, green bean casserole, sweet potato casserole. And you're looking at all these foods. Well, those are all your options to feed yourself. And then you have to think about, okay, well, I do know that sweet potatoes, they make me feel great. So that's going on my plate. Now there's mashed potatoes. Well, they taste really good, but my GI tract is going to be in turmoil if I eat those. So we're probably going to avoid that one because it's not going to be as good a taste in my mouth as it's going to be giving me a tummy ache later. And that's kind of how I go about a lot of times when I'm choosing from this big smorgasbord for the holidays, because I want to be able to spend time with my family, not feel icky while I'm spending time with family. And once we start learning that, you can actually reduce a lot of weight gain over the holidays by being more choosy about, again, that informed consent that this is going to taste good and it's going to make me feel good. And I can spend a time with it. Now, it doesn't mean you can't have it. you know, I don't ever tell any of my clients you can't have whatever you want for Christmas or the holiday. But I'm going to tell you, you will have the consequences of it. That's your informed consent. I remember one year we went out to a family, a small portion of our family went to a cabin, and I love lasagna, or I did. And instead of having the traditional Christmas, I decided that I was going to make lasagna. And this is before I learned how to make a better lasagna. But anyway, this is kind of on the beginning end of my journey into naturopathic medicine and all this stuff. And we had lasagna, and I'm gonna tell you, it made me super sick. It was terrible, and that's probably one of the last times I've had lasagna. But it made me to realize, I need to have a better way. And so I do little lasagna things with zucchini noodles. So I slice the zucchini real thin, and that's my zucchini noodle, because I don't do, just like with Dr. Mommy, I don't do well with gluten. So I have to find other ways. And then I also have to recognize I have to change up the cheese, because me and cheese, we don't get along either. And then there's the tomato sauce, which also doesn't do me too well either. So I have to be very particular in how much sauce I put in, what types of cheese I put in, and this is what people have, you learn as you're learning your foods, and you're learning, okay, so this is what usually goes into the dish that I really love. How can I modify it to fit me? And then, like, Dr. Mommy was saying, I do the same thing. I'm very particular in how I eat, and you know this, don't you? When I come over to eat, I'm so particular. So sometimes I'm like, okay, these are the things I can't eat. So I am probably more picky than most. And so I do also, just like Dr. Mommy does, I take something with me when I go to somebody's for a holiday dinner or any dinner, because I can be very, very picky. And so most times I tend to invite people over to my place so I can make it myself. I know what I like, and I make it really good, and people tend to like my food. Um, so that they don't have to deal with my picky behavior. Um, but yeah, so that's kind of the thing that I do over the holidays, is really being aware of the choices I make in relation, just like you, on how they make me feel, but also in making sure that I still have that joy of the holiday. that's the one thing I don't want for my clients, and I don't, for anybody listening, is to go the stressful way in the holidays thinking, I can't have this, I can't have that. Um, it's just going to be, they're just going to have junk food there or whatever. We want you to have options. That's why we're kind of sharing it with you, is to realize that you can still have a happy holiday and you can still enjoy the things you love, but just being cognizant, one of the things, we tend to eat too much because we're spending too much time talking and just throwing things on our plate and not taking in just a moment. It only takes a moment to kind of just scan the smorgasbord for those healthier options, and then the one thing that you really just can't pass up. And you kind of focus on that and give yourself a moment with that yummy food. And also pay attention to how you feel after you eat it, because that might be the deciding factor the next year to say, maybe it's not really worth that little, I ate a Christmas cake the other day, the Debbie Snack Christmas cakes, and I realized, why do I like these things? Ugh. But it's just a childhood memory with it. But it was just like, ooh.
Yeah,
So, yeah, that's kind of how I
yeah.
take a gander at the holidays.
No, it's funny. I was texting a colleague because they're not like typical sodas, they're like natural sugar sodas. And I like carbonated drinks. I know some people are like anti-carbonated drinks. My favorite is hops water. It's like hops tea, but I can't access that without spending a lot of money that I'm not ready to spend.
Mm,
So I've been looking at like they have like Italian sodas and all of these things, and I drank one of them recently, and I felt I felt my blood vessels shrinking, and then I started getting cold. And so I have a cold constitution by nature, and for the first time in a long time, I actually am like, my blood circulation is to my fingers and my toes. So I'm feeling great, right? And this happened yesterday. So, this is an example of like those check ins.
mhm,
So I was just like, wow, I guess I'm going back to just like carbonated water or, sparkling waters and all of that, or maybe I'm going to find a way to make my own,
mhm,
because I personally cannot do the extra sugar. It made me think of like, wow, I can understand now. I understand where diabetic neuropathy comes from, because I'm feeling the constriction in my vessels in my fingers
mhm,
while I'm drinking, taking this sip, and I could only imagine if you have a higher level of blood glucose and you're not even aware of how said food item or drink
mhm,
is affecting you, and constantly having, we talk about sugar. It's not that I was accused by a loved one of like hating sugar, and I was like, I think you misunderstand me. I love honey. I take a teaspoon of honey and I enjoy it. I use it in medicine, things like that. But when it comes to added sugars, really understanding what's happening to our bodies helps us to make, as you said, those informed choices. It
mhm,
allows us to be empowered. And
mhm,
I happen to be super sensitive. So when I ingest food and I'm aware of, oh my gosh, I was like literally just warm and now I'm freezing cold. And the only thing that I did was drink something. And in the moment, I could feel the change. That's how I know that, like, wow, we really have to be aware in what we're doing, because the consequences of doing it over and over and over for periods of time is literally how these lifestyle diseases become an issue. And so when we're looking at things like the hemoglobin A1C, which is one of the measurements that we use to assess whether somebody is diagnosed with diabetes, what that actually is telling us is over a 90-day period, 90 days to 120 days, how much of your blood cells have sugar attached to them, and how high is that level? And so we're looking over a 90-day period, because we get new blood cells every 90 to 120 days. And so if you have high blood sugar, that means that that glucose is just hanging out, and then it attaches, and we're constantly creating new blood cells, right? And those blood cells, even when they're brand new, can be affected because of what's in the environment. And so, as we're talking about lifestyle and we're talking about nutrition and we're talking about goal setting and health, that experience that I had yesterday really, really, really like made an imprint. And it made me, we talk about, well, you mentioned that it takes, I think you said 14 weeks to make a change. As a clinical hypnotherapist, I've seen that change can happen relatively quickly when we're addressing it from the subconscious level, right? One of the programs or specialties that I'm working with is smoking cessation. And with smoking cessation, people who have been smoking for a long time, they have this behavior. Sometimes it starts, like a lot of times it starts when you're young. I had a colleague friend, like a classmate friend, who essentially shared that a breakup when they were 16 is what caused them to start smoking. And I'm like, wow, so young, right? Um, and and they smoke a lot, like quite a bit. And I was just like, okay, so I put that in my mind. I'm like, all right. But when I'm working with people, one of the things that I ask is, are you ready to stop? Because within the hypnotherapy realm, we choose a date, you commit to that date, and when that date comes, you stop, right? And we're going to work together to address the emotions that drive it. So for specifically the person I just shared, their breakup, did they ever address those emotions, right? So working with them to this is a colleague friend. It's not really like a patient, but as an example, when I'm working with patients, like whatever is the cause, let's address the emotions that drove that. And then from there, then we can address the other things. So some people continue to smoke because they don't want to gain weight. They notice that when they're smoking, they lose weight. So then for me, I ask, okay, so like let's look at your food, your nutrition. What are you consuming? And do we need to make some changes? Because we know nicotine, it acts as a stimulant. So there are physiological changes or advantages to smoking, right? So looking at the stimulant, so that will cause you to maybe burn a little bit more calories quicker. But are there things that we can do? Are there changes that you can make so that, again, weight gain is not really a major issue, right?
Mm.
And so when I'm working with even like smoking cessation is really meeting the person where they are, because some people are resistant to change. And so having it, when there's resistance to the change, or somebody is like they want to change but they're not ready, then we have to work with that. Because traditionally a hypnotherapist will be like, well, if you're not ready to change, there's not much I can do with you. But one of the things that I'm finding is, if you are at that stage where you're contemplating change, can we talk about and can we help address the resistance to the change? And then if we're addressing the resistance to the change, then we're able to move the person further along, so that when they are ready to say, okay, I'm going to stop smoking, today is the day, we already have started the emotional work. So when they commit to that, they're able to achieve their goal. The nice thing about being a naturopathic doctor is that we do have in our arsenal herbs, right? There's herbs and homeopathics that have been used traditionally to support the smoking cessation, right? So the same way that somebody may use a nicotine patch, we actually have, there's a combination of nervines and then other herbs that we can use. So nervines helps to calm the nervous system and that anxiety, and then herbs that actually affect the receptors that nicotine would also act on. So if we're looking at it from an enzymatic reaction, you have enzyme, you have a substrate, nicotine would be the substrate. But if you actually have a different substrate, so a different lock, we're talking about
Mhm.
keys and locks, right? You have a different key that's in that lock, which is the enzyme. If that key is in that lock, the lock is occupied, and so maybe the nicotine is not going to be have the same effects, because there is something that is blocking the effect. And so being able to utilize our herbs in that way, to me, helps patients to be able to actually stop smoking and have support that is working on their nervous system, which I think is one of the biggest things that when we're talking about lifestyle changes and goals, that could be a very stressful. But
Mhm.
as we talked in previous podcast episodes about stress, stress creates a whole different cascade, which also can contribute to undesired results because, again, that stress is creating our nervous system to be activated. And when our nervous system is activated, then we go back to what is comfortable, right?
Mhm.
So during the holidays, as because Thanksgiving in the US is like right around the corner, right?
Mhm.
So as you're approaching the holidays and you're really going into it, thinking about ways that we manage our stress, finding ways that we can really regulate our nervous system so that when we're in those environments, because sometimes even spending time with family can be triggering,
Mhm.
and I was the emotional eater. Like, if I'm not comfortable, I'm going for food because food is available and it does not judge, right? So I found that if I'm not comfortable, I tend to eat. And so once I worked through that emotional barrier where I recognized that I had that social anxiety, I can find different ways to address it. Sometimes it's like you find that one person that's on your team and or there's activities like I love playing games, right? So I'm if I'm playing games or I'm socializing in that way, we're doing karaoke, we're doing something that's fun and engaging. When I was younger, my parents like the holidays would turn into like dance parties. So when those activities start up and we're not just focusing on food, then I'm actually able to like calm my nervous system, avoid the uncomfortable questions. It's like when you're older and you're single and you go to the family outing, it's like, oh, so tell us about that. And it's just like, okay, like, you know,
Busy.
this makes me uncomfortable. And instead of being rude about it or anything like that, it's like, oh my gosh, have you done X, Y, and Z? Would you like to play a game of cards? I know this amazing game. Like, who wants to play? Just doing things like that that helps to make the environment less stressful, so that we're able to overcome some of those moments that may drive us to the undesired food or the undesired behavior. So,
Mhm.
you know, um, yeah, it's really interesting helping people with changing their behaviors because a lot of the things that trigger our unwanted behaviors are the same things that our patients are dealing with. And maybe we're a little further along or we may not have had that behavior, so it's not a maladaptive behavior or a behavior that is not helpful. So, if that's not the case, when we do, what are our behaviors? As a practitioner, and that's what I do. Like, okay, I may not be able to speak on maybe smoking because I didn't have that addiction, but I do love K dramas and I have to manage my episodes because I could just, go a whole day and be like, whoa, 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 did I get anything done? Right now, because I have an ambitious goal, I found that I'm not really, focusing on the things that are not helpful, but it's because I have a purpose and that purpose is driving me. And I
Mhm.
feel like when we're talking about goals, helping people to have like the why. Why am I doing this? In our education, we are always reminded why. Why is it that you want to become a doctor? Because when the times get hard, that why is going to push you forward. And so I use that with my patients. I ask them, why is it that you want to do this? And with that why, we can build purpose around that and help them to achieve those goals and make it a lifestyle so that it's not negatively impacted.
Mm. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, that's the thing is when we're setting ourselves up for a change in life, I think that a lot of times we just throw out a change, we throw out a resolution. And I liked what you had mentioned earlier about reflecting on the previous year at the end of the year, because I think that and what was good for you and what wasn't. And I think that's a really a great place for people to start is just kind of taking inventory. What's my weaknesses? What are my strengths? What are my goals? What are my things I want? Again, going back to character, what types of character or traits do you want to have? What is it that you're looking for? And then say why. Why do you want this? Because if you don't have a why, and this is one of the things I do a lot of times with my clients and with individuals I talk about when we're making these changes, when I'm giving recommendations, so to speak, I want them to know why. Because just it's kind of like, you remember when you were a small little child between 3 and 5 years old, and your mother tells you to do something. What was the question you asked them? Why? That's their number one word, between 3 and 5 is why, why. And so be that 3-year-old to yourself when you're trying to make a change or you're trying to do something, is go why. Because when there's a substantial why that makes sense to you, and that's why I always tell people, this is why I'm asking you to do this change. This is why I'm giving you this, whether it be a recommendation on a supplement, a nutritional supplement, whether it's a recommendation on how to move or how to eat, what type of nutrition to look into, is because I want you to know the results that you'll probably have, because it's going to be in physiology mainly, because I love physiology and your body is all physiology when it comes to health and wellness. As a healthcare practitioner and a health coach. And that is the reason that when you can understand why, it gives you a reason to go out and do those things. If you just, you didn't do very good when your mother said, it's because I said so, and that's why. Did you do very well with that response? Probably not too
No.
often. And just saying, because I'm not a doctor yet, but if your doctor says, because I'm the doctor and I know, and that's why, that doesn't, it's kind of the same kind of concept. There needs to be a substantial reason, and the same for you. It's because I want that, and that's why. That's not going to help you move forward. It needs to be something that's significant to you when you make that why. And I would recommend writing it out. Write out your goal, whatever it is. I'm not going to say New Year's resolution, but your lifestyle change, your whatever that is, write it out, and then underneath it, put your why. And it needs to be a substantial why. And I'm going to say, not even just to say, because I want to be healthy, because everybody wants to be healthy, and it's a great, why in a sense, but I want you to be a little bit more specific. Why? What does health mean to you? What is that health going to give you? What is it that it's going to drive you? Because a lot of times when we're healthy or we're wanting health, it's really so that we can be there, for a family member, to be a better, whatever it is. Maybe it's, so you can be a better dancer. I don't know. I'm not a dancer. I don't have much coordination. But anyway, I do love ice dancing and ice skating, but I was just put in with the 5-year-olds when I competed at 36 because I was a beginner. But anyway, enough about me. But then, that's the thing is we want something specific when you're saying your why, because when it has a, kind of in a sense, you're painting a picture, something vivid in your mind. And when you have a picture in your mind, I'm going to recommend that you do a meditation with that picture in mind of, why am I doing this? This is my picture. I am doing XYZ. Like, for me, I would really like to start doing some, I'd love to get back into CrossFit, but I can't afford it right now. But I like to feel strong, and I would really love to be able to do a pull up and a push up. I can't, my upper body stinks. But I'm thinking about, my goal is to get back in the gym and to do some, strength training. And the two things that, why, is because I want to feel strong. I want to feel like I can, beat somebody up. Not that I want to beat somebody up, but, feel like I can protect myself. That's the word I'm looking for. I want to be somebody that feels confident that I can protect myself. And to be able to do those things, to me, gives me some, kind of concept of it. So being able to get in the gym and to feel strong and to be able to protect myself. I like to do kickboxing. I kickbox a bag downstairs, but I still don't have, the confidence that my upper body is strong enough because I can't lift myself up and I can't do a push up. And so those are kind of my whys of why I want to get back in the gym and get back to lifting. I almost had it when I was in CrossFit before I went back to school. I was just a hair away from doing a pull up and I was getting my push ups. And, and it was like I felt so strong and I was like, I'm I'm a bad girl, man. I can really throw myself around. So that's my why. Is I want to feel strong in my body. I feel like I could protect myself. I know I can run away from somebody. I at least got that, but because I run, I can go pretty far. But I'd still like to just feel strong. I have this picture of me, with some nice biceps, but that's is my kind of recommendation to those that are listening and to my clients is make it specific, have this vision of you that you want to be when you're making this goal, this lifestyle change, so that you can actually begin to walk towards it. In my faith, there was a gentleman that mentioned, he says, picture a well body and walk towards it. So you have to have a picture. That means specific, detailed picture, and you walk towards it. What does that walk towards it mean? That means you make those efforts every day to move towards it, those actions that lead you to that person. But if you don't have a picture of who that person is, you can't make these steps that get you there. And that's why it's so important to have that detailed why, that detailed picture of you, of what you're going to be doing, how you're going to be doing it, what you're doing it for, whatever it is. And you picture that person, that you, and you take those actions towards it. Because if you don't have that picture, there's another saying out there that says, without a vision, the people perish,
Mm-hmm.
right? Being able to have that picture of you. I think in the book with Dr. Joe Dispenza, I think it's You Are the Placebo or Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. I think he mentions it in quite a few of his books. But he talks about when you're doing a meditation to manifest, you have to be detailed in it for you to be able to move towards it. And so I'm still working on being able to do it because sometimes I'm sitting here going, what do I really want? How do I really want? Why do I really want? You know, and I'm slowly getting that vision in mind for me because I think sometimes we hold ourselves back because we don't think we're worthy enough for it, or that maybe we're being too overly extravagant. But why? With us, I mean, anything is possible. In the scripture, it says all things are possible. Them that believe God. So, you know, and I think we limit ourselves in that because of, like, Dr. Mommy had mentioned, that you mentioned, is those past things in the past, those histories. What started somebody, somebody that we loved ended up, breaking up with us, or whatever it might been, somebody let us down, and then that made us feel like we were unlovable, or we were this or that, and we have those beliefs in there from our life experiences that are not true beliefs, and we need to break them so that we can have um, a better vision of what it is we're trying to strive for in these making these goals, because a lot of times those are the things that trip us up in being able to make those lifestyle changes. And so I honestly, I agree with you, Dr. Mami, about working through that first when you're trying to make a change, that what's keeping you from it. And let's work through that, because those things, those beliefs can really create, and we talked about this, like you mentioned a few times before, our beliefs create our habits or our actions, right? And those actions are our lifestyle, and that creates our health, right? Overall. So we have to go back and change some of those beliefs about ourselves so we can change the habits that they form that can change the health that we're projecting. And that's the kind of the crux of it in it. So I'm gonna turn it back over to you. What do you think?
Yeah. No, I appreciate what you said, and I do agree with a lot of what you said. It's interesting when you brought up manifestation, my brain went to two things. So there's two ways of looking at like the manifestation. Some people do like within like the manifestation communities, Some of them are really focused on achieving the material successes that we want. But I like to actually look at it from, why don't I align spiritually, right?
Mhm.
And in my spiritual alignment, um, like, I'm not Christian, but I grew up with the Bible. So I do, like, when we talk about foundations of belief, a lot of the things that I do lean on are things like, talking about like the kingdom of God is available to all of us, right?
Mhm.
You align with the kingdom, you have to align with that which you believe. And so for me, my faith may be different, but I still, they're similar foundations through the alignment with your higher, um, your spiritual connection. The kingdom, or for me, is like the suffering may be reduced, right? The suffering may be reduced, and then things that may be aligned with me may come into my life, even though, yeah, I have like, I do have desires that I want, but like, what about releasing the expectation? Because in those expectations, in the wants and the desires, that's where our suffering comes from, right? And this is a challenge we're talking about. I find myself struggling with that sometimes myself. So it's not a perfect practice. But what I have found is, when it comes to manifesting and attracting our desires, like you were saying, all things are possible. And it's like, through Christ that strengthens me, or through God that strengthens me, right?
Mhm.
It is aligning with that higher power that allows you to let go and be vulnerable, right? Be vulnerable. Like, I know that there are moments I'm like, whoa, I'm living in a country where I don't have family. And the support that I have for myself comes from the work that I do, right? Or like certain, like the foundations that I've built, like through my education, all these things. And there are moments where I know, in the last, it's almost 6 months that I've been in Korea, right? So in the last 6 months, there are times where I'm like, you know what? I don't know what else to do right now, but I am going to pray. I am going to pray. And I mean, I grew up praying, and even as a Buddhist, prayer is part of the practice. And so I found that when it comes to achieving my goals, when I'm just like, you know what, I don't know what is going to happen, I just pray, and then I let it go. And that'll actually, through, like, when I pray, sometimes I'm like, like, it's so weird, because sometimes I'm like having a moment and my mom calls me, and I'm like, I do my emotional release. She wants to know. She's like, oh, I can hear in your voice that, so she listens to my voice. And I do this with people because I'm not always face to face. I'm like, I can hear in your voice something's not right. Right. And
Mhm.
she's like, what's bothering you? And then I go through it. Oh, blah, 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 blah. And then she always is so encouraging, and
Mhm.
all these things. And she like reminds me, usually with a story, um, of something that gives me strength. And it's so funny, because usually that happens while I'm praying. Sometimes I'm like emotionally praying or whatever. I'm praying and I'm asking for guidance and support. And even yesterday, so, my goals are quite ambitious. They're kind of very, like, some people may not think that they're attainable. Some, because it's like, why would you do this, right? But being older, coming into medicine, I have friends that they're medical doctors, MDs, who, after training and doing things, they decide to become naturopathic doctors, or they're becoming acupuncturists. And some of them come from different countries, so they have to learn the language and do all these things. But it's like, going through that process, choosing that process, is not easy. And what I'm learning is the foundations for everything is not Korean, it's Chinese, right? So not only am I learning Korean, but I'm also learning the Chinese characters that are the foundations of the language. This is not easy, not easy
Mhm.
at all. I've learned 51 characters in the last, I would say, in the last couple of weeks. It's a lot. And then I also have a Chinese to Korean to English and Japanese multilingual dictionary that I was like, this is the best investment that I've made, because the apps, they just give you words, and I can use multiple apps, but that dictionary helps me more than anything. So I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm like, wow, Mommy Mensima, you're like what the heck are you doing, right? But because I made that commitment, and I do, like, for me, what drives me is I believe firmly in traditional medicine. We are here because of the traditions of our ancestors. I'm not like so traditional that like I don't believe in current modern science. No, I integrate it. I've had to do that with patients. I don't feel like I'm a failure if a patient chooses to go with medication, but usually they come back to me as well. And they're just like, hey, doc, I did this and now this is what's going on. What do you think? And I explain to them, right? But because I know that for me, traditional medicine, there are some things that I don't get because it's translated from translations and translations. My ambition is to be able to read the classics and be able to find and study with people who understand the classics. And they may choose to be more conventional in their practice, using more modern medicine, or they may choose to be traditional practitioners. The choice is based off of them and their experience and their belief. For me, I do run traditionally. And because of that, my inspiration is to really, really, really get a grasp of multiple traditions, not just TCM, but like historically in Korea, some of the classics are maintained. Like we talk about five elements and things like that. Some of those foundational texts are actually in the Korean medicine books and training. And there is a different evolution of how the medicine can go and has gone because of not sharing the same history, right? But in order to get there, I have to learn a new language. And then not just one language, I'm learning another language. And then I have to be competent enough to take medical exams. So it's like if even if I know the science, if I don't understand how the language it's in, I can get the wrong answer, not because I don't know the knowledge, but because of the language. So again, ambitious. But my why is my patients. Being able to help those patients who really want these traditional practices so that they can create a lifestyle that's aligned with their culture, because a lot of the traditional medicines align, even like my Ghanaian culture. I find myself in Korea closer to my own culture because of the foundations of the medicine. And so that's what drives me. It's like helping people to get closer to the earth if they want to be closer to the earth, and having a solid foundation that really shares how traditionally life was sustained. Longevity medicine comes from these traditions. So if longevity was found out 2,000 years ago, then why am I not understanding how to apply it, and can I adapt it to the modern person? So when we're talking about goals, that is my current goal. Like I said, it's hella ambitious. Sorry for the language. It is very ambitious. And I'm doing it and still enjoying my life, like taking walks, meeting up with friends. I think I'll post on my non-doctor account some of our study, like after studying, like some of the things that we're doing, like foods, and like studying in a cafe and having that social interaction just for language and stuff. Enjoying beauty. I'm taking long walks, or my breaks are in nature because I love nature. So like these are things that I do that feed my spirit so that I'm not burning out, right? I'm not allowing myself to get stressed. I'm taking the moments to really to balance myself so that my ambition is not going to lead me down a path of dis-ease, but will actually be wellness for me and for my patients.
Yeah, I'm very big ambitions. I can say I'm pretty ambitious myself, but I was just thinking when you were talking about that, just a moment, just the last thing that we were talking about, where you were doing something that aligns with you, that you love, and yeah, you still do the other, extracurricular things, you could say. Um, but I was thinking about something. It made me think about something today. I saw supposedly an article or something about Morgan Freeman. Somebody said he was going to retire, and he said, "Don't tell me I'm going to retire. I'm never retiring. I'm going to be doing this forever."
Wow,
And
look
I
at
was
it.
thinking about that. I said, that's a good thing. When you can find a career that is really not necessarily a career, but it's you and your purpose in life, you know, why would you stop? And I kind of think about that in my, journey to becoming a Chinese medicine and natural medicine doctor, that I don't ever see myself retiring because it's who I am, you know? And when you're doing that, it's a blessing to find your purpose in life, to find that the career is not a career as much as it is you. And excuse me, and I think that also when we make choices in a lifestyle change, when we aligns with who we are in the inside, just like you were saying, going into a spiritual alignment, when you recognize this is who I want to be. And I tell people, I said, when you make a choice or you're moving towards your why, going back to that why is who you are on the inside. You already have the biggest step that you need to make that change because it's reflecting that person on the inside. And that's going to come out. Now, if you're trying to make a change and it doesn't resonate with who you feel you are on the inside or who you are truly on the inside, it's going to be difficult. And sometimes that's why we have the dis-ease and we're doing habits that really doesn't resonate with the true you on the inside. We have nature versus nurture, right? Those things that we come up in life with, nature versus nurture. And a lot of times the nurture side, some of the things that we get from our nurturing side, that's our family, the people we were around when we were young, mothers, fathers, ancestors, um, whatever, society.
Mhm.
Um, the thing that comes to mind is we create habits that do not align with who we are, who we were created to be, who our purpose is in life, and that's why we end up in this ease, because it's not our true self. The foods that we've been given from our society, those little Debbie snacks. Sorry, I'm hitting on it if anybody likes little Debbie's. But, our processed foods, those are not us. That's why they cause illness, because they're not true natural foods. We're really sustained by those grass-fed free range meats, the homegrown vegetables, the herbs. Our medicine is herbs. Yes, we, not putting down pharmaceuticals, they have a place. But we used to have knowledge of herbs and how to use them for our health and wellness, that we could use them when we start getting a sniffle so it doesn't go on to something more. We knew when we started getting a cough, let's go ahead and get us an elderberry honey syrup, and and knock that cough out, real quick. We had this
Yeah.
knowledge. And that's the same as when we can take a moment. That's why meditation is so good. That's why I loved, again, your reflection that you do at the end of the year. When we stop and we take, and we don't get that time, we don't make that time to really reflect on the inside. Who are we? Who are we meant to be? What is it that is really my desire to be? Because that, again, is going to go
Mhm.
back to making your why when you make those lifestyle changes to health and wellness. Because health and wellness doesn't just go to the physical man, keeping you from having joint pain, keeping you from having back pain, keeping you from having migraines, hypertension, diabetes, you know, all those things are in the physical, but there is also the spiritual and emotional realms that does health and wellness. We talk about mental health, and all these things culminate into the inner man that we are. And that's why, you'll hear a lot about meditation practices, especially in traditional medicines, because we understand the three-part being: body, soul, and spirit. Um, and so when we take time to reflect, and I'll probably point you back to the books by Dr. Joe Dispenza, where he gets into breaking the habit of being yourself. I mean, there's many, many other writers that get into this topic, where when you do meditation and you're reflecting and you're taking a moment of silence with yourself, and with, your God, with God, you can really begin to see who you were created to be, that purpose, because it's in there, it's driving you. But we don't stop long enough. And I think sometimes that's what causes a little dis-ease, is the fact that we haven't sat with ourselves to say, have I even got to know me, you know, and my why? Because when we do, that's when we're going to make those choices for a lifestyle that resonates with who we really, really are. And I've seen it in myself, taking those moments of silence with myself, with the Lord, and recognizing, and it's a beautiful thing when you find your purpose and you find that career path or whatever it is that you're looking for. Because is it going to be easy?
No.
Not at all. Somebody had told me 10 years ago, before I started on this journey, you're going to be a doctor of Chinese medicine and natural medicine. I'm like, no, I don't think so. And it's been a rough 10 years, but it's been a glorious 10 years. So again, going back to that, you can either have character or you can have an easy life, but you ain't going to have both. Well, I chose a character
Right.
life, and it wasn't an easy life, and it's been some ups and some downs, and I thank the Lord He gave me some wonderful friends like Dr. Mame to help me through, because I've talked about it before. If I didn't have her, I might not have been here with that poisoning. Um, Evening, jumping on her little scooter at 11 o'clock at night, coming over and saving me. And he gives it. And I think you were talking about something about your mama. That was once when you were saying your mom would call you when were doing some meditating or getting into, having a rough time praying. I was talking to a friend earlier this evening and kind of got on that topic. You were talking about pride and stuff. We need each other. We pray and we say sometimes a lot of Christians, they pray and say, I left it with the Lord, but they don't pay attention to where is the Lord, right? When you pray, they think that's got to be some big, monstrous miracle that comes down and, 'cause instead of realizing that he's going to have your mama call you on the phone to give you the answer that you need, to give you that encouragement. It could be, this is where we get lost sometimes in recognizing the doctors are there as a hand in your healing. People want a miraculous healing. I've dealt with people like that. Well, I prayed about it and the Lord's going to heal them. Well, he has all these people out here to give you that healing. It's not, he wants people to have purpose. And I was telling her, I said, the reason we have doctors, we have traditional healers, we have these different ones, counselors, we have your friends and family. Each of these people have to have a purpose, and that purpose is to help you, and vice versa, you to help me. And so when we're on these journeys to making life changes and lifestyle changes, that's why we're here. We have to have a purpose. You have to give me a purpose in my life. What's the point of me being a health coach if I don't have anybody to coach? And the same if I need somebody to fix my car, I could pray my car, please stay good, and he's done really great in keeping my car running. But if my car needs some help, I need somebody that can fix a car. That's their purpose. They love fixing cars. They like getting their hands all greasy. I don't. I do not like getting my hands greasy, so I don't do no car fixing. I don't like that kind of greasy hands. I don't mind using, some, essential oils and stuff, but I ain't getting inside them cars and fixing them. So I need somebody to fix my car for me when I need a car fix. That gives them purpose, and they love it. At auto mechanics, they went into it because they love it, and that gives them purpose in life. And that's how the Lord works, is through each of us to do our purpose to help one another. That's what gives it. We lose sight of purpose when we lose sight that we're here for somebody else. We're filling in a gap that they need, and vice versa. They're filling in a gap for me that I, we can't know everything and we can't do everything. We're going to have ups, we're going to have downs. And sometimes, they'll call us on the phone like your mom did right in the middle of prayer. Hey, I hear something's up, or I feel like something's going off. And if you reach into saying that's God, I know we're getting a little, more spiritual here, but it's the same, is that's somebody reaching out to me that can help me. And that can be, if you're, spiritual, that could be God, taking care of that need through that person. Or it's just, that's where you gain your strength, is from others. That's what gives them purpose and gives you purpose. And then that goes back to that why, right? That gives you the ability to move forward and actually reach your goal. We're not meant to walk this road alone. We're not meant to get to our destinations alone. We think that's what it is. We think we're less than or we're weak if we have to go get somebody to help us out. No. Again, Life is worth living when it has a purpose. And the best time to have a purpose is when you're helping somebody else. So I always encourage for my clients, I do a support group because in a support group, you're not alone on your journey to health and wellness. You're not walking that road alone. And you can actually, each of you's experiences when I get my classes together, my support groups each week, I always start with what was your successes and what were your challenges, and then I also say we also talk about what did you learn that might be helpful to somebody else, because when they all we learn from each other's experiences, and we can we always say yay for your goal that you met for the week, whatever that little goal was. Um, and then we share, oh, I had that issue. And that's the thing is when they hear, oh, somebody else had the same problem, I'm not alone, and I'm not weak, and I'm not this. And we help each other along through it, and it gives them purpose along the way as well, that they're not walking alone, and they're helping somebody else meet their goal. And when they see that person's doing better because of them, then that gives them, spurs them on into their goals. And that's kind of one way that I kind of encourage community, and reaching out and recognizing that we have each other to support us on our journeys to health and wellness. And I think that's probably one of my biggest things that I would love for you to take away from this evening's chat or this episode's chat is, don't take the journey alone to your success and for your goal, or whatever, your lifestyle change. We don't want to call it well, we can call it a New Year revolution since it's coming up, New Year's resolution. But when you're making those changes in life, don't do it alone. Always have some support if you can.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. One of the things that I share with my patients is volunteering. And I have found in my experience that volunteering helps to provide that sense of community, and then also helps us find that sense of purpose by helping those who may need more than what they have. And it also puts us in a place of gratitude, right?
Mhm.
And with that gratitude, it allows us to come back and be more receptive, right? So I find for me in the practices, I agree with having the groups that support your clients and also support patients. And in addition to that, I encourage people to take another step forward, and especially during the holidays, especially right now with all the chaos happening, people need us. We need each other. We're not in silos. Staying in the silos, staying in your own little isolated bubble, it does not it is not supportive for our mental and emotional wellness. But in addition to that, through helping other people, the good that it's like we're sowing seeds of good. When we're sowing those good seeds come back to us. The good harvest comes back to us. And just as you were saying, my dad has always taught me that when we're praying, that the divine works through people. It is not through some, oh, I mean, there was a time, but it was still through a person. I was short like $20 or $30, and I was traveling, and somebody dropped $30, exactly what I needed. It was wild and crazy. And then this was like in New York, it was a subway, they ran off. So the money dropped right in front of me. And then I go and I'm like, hey, and the person was gone, and the person next to me said, look, that's yours. And again, it's true people. That was a stranger. But that was like the wildest that, something like that has ever happened. But really, what I found is through people. It is when we reach out to others, is when others reach out to me, that I find that, I find my blessings. And so that is part of the reason why it's easy for me. Like when you called and you're like, yo, I need help. I'm like, without a doubt, I'm there for you, because it's through my relationships with people that the ore is extended and I can grasp on, right? That's I remember I was looking for a job in New York. It was a restaurant job. I had no experience. And the restaurant owner interviewed me. He said, you know what? I'm going to extend this ore to you. And it's up to you to grab onto it. But I'm going to give you this chance. And at that restaurant, I was able to go hostess, waitress, bartending, all of the above. And because he extended his support to me, somebody he doesn't know, but I was just like, this is I'm here. I showed up, and he had an open call, and he liked who I was. So it's through our relationships, and like you said, the character that we build and who we are in the world and to ourselves, that we're able to get the opportunities that allow us to maybe be able get closer to those goals that we have. So I really thank you for sharing that. It's been a very, I mean, there's some things that we can continue on. I wanted to talk about perfectionism and how do we embrace that, but it seems like that's going to be a conversation for another time. And I want to encourage you. We're going through the holidays, and for our listeners, if you find yourself, like, if you're looking to make changes and you're like, you know what, I'm ready to reach out and get the support I need so that I can overcome some of the challenges that I've been facing. Maybe you've been trying to, like, manage your weight over the years and you keep on hitting the same wall. If you're interested in getting additional support, feel free to reach out to myself or health empowerment coach Joanna Mickel, because we will be able to support you on your journey and help you achieve those goals, make them actionable, and help provide the support, and be a part of your extended community so that you can achieve those goals, and you have someone in your on your team who understands. We both are always working. I wouldn't say we're always improving ourselves. We're always, we're just we're living the medicine, and with that comes the adversities, but also it comes like the beauty. And because we embody what we practice and we teach, we're able to support people and have the capacity with empathy and compassion. And so if you're looking for that level of support, you know that compassionate care and empowering care, reach out to us. You can, I love, you could just text, you could text my office number, or you can reach out to Joanna. Our links to our websites are always in the description. But yeah, we would love to hear from you if you're looking for additional support. Anything else, Joanna, you wanted to add?
No, that's what I would share too. If you're looking for some support and a root, a cheerleader in your corner, not just a cheerleader, but a coach too. We're here to do those things to help you to meet those goals and to regain, you know, life and high quality of life for that, and longevity in front of you too. To be able to be the best you can be, the one that's right there in that heart space. So thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you for listening. All right, until next time.